A light rain fell over Chicago. Ethan Miles, a single dad, was repairing an old sedan in his small garage when a black luxury car slid in, brakes squealing. Isabella Gray, young CEO of Gray Tech, stepped out, furious. "Did you cut my brake line?" Ethan froze, his hands covered in oil and grease trembling slightly. "What? I've never touched your car." She held up her phone showing security footage. Him the previous night, crouched by her car's wheel. Ethan's mouth fell open, not realizing that last night he'd only been rescuing a kitten trapped under her car, an act that would lead to a fateful twist for both of them. Ethan Miles was 37 years old, a single dad who'd once been a senior automotive engineer for a major company, but had quit his promising career after his wife passed away from cancer, now raising his 8-year-old daughter Grace completely alone in their small house on the outskirts of Chicago. He ran a modest shop called Miles Auto Repairs on a quiet street, living simply and working diligently from dawn until dusk, beloved by everyone in the neighborhood for his honest work and kind heart. Every morning he made coffee for customers and taught Grace mathematics between the sounds of engines running and tools clanging, turning the garage into both a workplace and a classroom. Grace suffered from chronic asthma, and he often worked late to pay for her expensive medications, but he still maintained the sacred ritual of reading bedtime stories to her every single night. Isabella Gray was 32 years old, CEO of tech conglomerate Gray Tech with offices in Chicago, New York, and London, just returned from London after an internal company scandal. The business press called her the Iron CEO, cold, uncompromising, ruthless in business, showing absolutely no mercy in corporate negotiations. But few knew she lived completely alone in a sterile penthouse apartment, carrying a deep wound from the tragic accident that had killed her father when she was 16. His car had suffered catastrophic brake failure. She'd watched the investigation, seen the reports about the mechanic who'd missed a critical leak, and had never trusted car repair shops since. One late night after leaving Gray Tech headquarters following a 16-hour workday, Isabella parked her black Mercedes in a public lot near Ethan's garage because her usual garage was under construction. As Ethan was closing up his shop around 11 p.m., he heard a small, pitiful cry, a tiny kitten stuck under a black luxury car. He knelt down in the rain and carefully removed the undercarriage panel to rescue the frightened animal, and his experienced eye noticed a small oil leak in the brake line that could become dangerous. Without thinking twice, he grabbed a metal clamp from his pocket and temporarily fixed the leak, probably saving someone from a serious accident. The interaction was inadvertently caught on the parking lot's security camera, though the angle made it impossible to see what he was actually doing. The next morning, Isabella drove toward an important board meeting. Her brakes made a strange grinding noise that sent ice through her veins. She immediately panicked, memories of her father's accident flooding back, and she managed to stop the car and call security. They checked the security camera footage and saw a man, Ethan, clearly visible crouching by her vehicle the previous night. Isabella drove straight to his garage, her anger and fear overwhelming any rational thought. "Do you know I almost died this morning because of what you did to my car?" Ethan stood completely silent and confused, oil-stained rag in hand, Grace peeking out from behind his leg. "You think I cut your brake line? Ma'am, I don't even know who you are. I have proof, video evidence." She showed him the security footage. He recognized himself, but the footage was clearly edited and cropped, missing crucial context. Ethan tried desperately to explain. "I was only rescuing a kitten, and I saw your brake line was leaking, so I clamped it. I was helping you." She laughed bitterly. "You expect me to believe that convenient story?" She called security and demanded the shop be immediately closed pending criminal investigation. Real witness detail. When Ethan returned home that evening, Grace asked, "Daddy, why are people angry at you for saving a cat? Isn't that what you always do?" He knelt down and stroked her head. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, the truth arrives a day later than the accusation." That night, Ethan lay awake thinking about the woman's face, the genuine fear in her eyes when she'd confronted him. He understood that fear. He'd felt it when Sarah was dying, when Grace was diagnosed with asthma. Fear makes people irrational. Fear makes us see enemies where there are none. Grace padded into his room at midnight. Daddy, did you really save a cat? Yes, baby, I did. And I fixed a problem on that lady's car. Then why doesn't she believe you? Ethan pulled his daughter close. Because she's scared. When people are scared, they forget how to see the truth. The next morning, news spread through the neighborhood. Customers who'd known Ethan for years began to doubt him. By the end of the week, the garage was completely empty. No customers, just silence and the crushing weight of false accusation. The rumor spread through Chicago like wildfire. Mechanic deliberately cut CEO's brake line in revenge plot. Ethan lost every customer, faced police investigation requiring a lawyer he couldn't afford, and Grace became frightened when people photographed her father and posted images online with vicious accusations. He didn't blame anyone, didn't lash out in anger, just quietly continued maintaining the empty shop, waiting patiently for vindication. His savings dwindled rapidly. Bills piled up. Grace's medication costs didn't stop, but he refused to let his daughter see him break. Every night he still read her stories, still helped with homework. 1 week after the accusation, Graytech's head maintenance engineer Robert Chen conducted a thorough examination and reported back to Isabella with shocking findings. Ms. Gray, I need to show you something important, he said, pulling up detailed photographs. The brake failure wasn't actually a failure. The system had developed a slow oil leak in the rear brake line. Someone had temporarily patched the leak with a metal clamp. Without that emergency repair, you would have lost brake fluid completely within another mile or two. Whoever did this saved your life. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. You mean Ethan Miles, actually saved me? This was skilled work, done quickly under difficult conditions, professional level repair. She sat down heavily. Oh my God, what have I done? She immediately reopened the security video and played it in slow motion. Light reflected on Ethan's focused face as his hands carefully placed a small metal object under her car, the exact clamp holding her brake line together. And if she looked closely, she could see him pulling a small kitten out first, exactly as he'd claimed. She sat completely still, the full weight of her mistake crushing down on her. She destroyed an innocent man's life because of her own unhealed trauma. She remembered his words, I was only rescuing a kitten. True, I've never touched your car. Also true, he'd repaired it, not tampered with it. And her response, mockery, accusation, legal action, public humiliation. She found her way to Miles Auto Repairs late that afternoon, seeing the handwritten, temporarily closed sign taped to the window. Her chest tightened with guilt at how small and humble the place was. Just a simple garage where an honest man had tried to make a living. She knocked on the house door, where Gray was arranging wildflowers in an old mason jar, humming softly. Ethan opened the door, eyes immediately wary and tired, dark circles suggesting he hadn't slept. Are you here to accuse me of something else? No. I came to say I'm sorry. I was completely, terribly wrong. He remained silent, expression unreadable, years of hurt visible in the lines around his eyes. Grace appeared, offering Isabella a glass of water with natural childlike hospitality. Do you have a cat, miss? The little girl asked. Daddy saved one from under your car. We named her Hope because even when things look really bad, there's always hope. Isabella smiled faintly, eyes stinging. I used to have a cat, but it ran away. I was very sad. Maybe it's waiting for you somewhere, Grace said with childlike wisdom. Maybe it's waiting for you to find it when you're ready. They sat in Ethan's modest living room, alive with memories. Grace's drawings on the refrigerator, photos of happier times, a worn couch with a handmade quilt. Isabella spoke quietly, voice breaking. My father died when I was 16 because his car lost its brakes. The police investigation showed a mechanic had missed a small leak. When I saw you under my car, all I could see was that mechanic. All I felt was that same terror and rage. She paused, tears spilling down her cheeks. I didn't see you, Ethan. I didn't see a good man doing a good deed. I only saw my father's death happening again. And I lashed out blindly. Ethan replied gently, anger dissolving. And I lost my wife Sarah 3 years ago, a drunk driver. For a long time, I hated every careless person. Fear and pain sometimes make us forget that others have also been hurt. A profound moment of silence hung between them. No more anger, only mutual understanding. I destroyed your business, Isabella whispered. I don't know how to make that right. The truth will make it right, Ethan said simply. That's all I need, just the truth. I'm holding a press conference tomorrow. I'm going to tell everyone what really happened. You don't have to do that. It could hurt your company. If I can't stand up for a basic truth, then what's the point of success? Grace tugged on Isabella's sleeve. Miss, do you want to see the kitten? She lives here now. Isabella's eyes widened. You kept it? Ethan shrugged. Couldn't let her go back to the streets after all the trouble she caused. They walked to the small backyard where a tiny orange kitten played with a piece of string. Her name is Hope, Grace announced, because Daddy says even when things look really bad, there's always hope. Isabella knelt and the kitten approached, purring. Tears filled her eyes. I haven't cried in 3 years, she whispered. Not since my father died. I thought being strong meant never showing emotion. Being strong means doing the right thing even when it's hard, Ethan said, even when it costs you everything. Real witness detail. Isabella pulled from her handbag the oil-stained metal clamp, the evidence that he'd saved her life. She placed it on the table and said softly, I made the biggest mistake of my life, but I'm going to fix it, no matter what it costs. That evening, Isabella sat in her empty penthouse, looking at the clamp under her desk lamp. Such a small thing. A simple metal clip worth maybe $1, but it had saved her life, and her response had been to destroy an innocent man's livelihood. She picked up her phone. Schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. I have a statement about the truth. Isabella decided to publicly reveal the complete truth, regardless of the consequences to her career or company. She called a major press conference at Gray Tech headquarters. The man I accused of attempting to harm me, Ethan Miles, is not only completely innocent, but he actually saved my life through his quick thinking and professional expertise. The press room, packed with journalists from major outlets, erupted in shocked murmurs and frantic note-taking. But the board of directors was absolutely furious, believing she was destroying the company's carefully managed image for the sake of a mere mechanic. The chairman, Robert Morrison, a man who'd been with the company since its founding 20 years ago, stood up with his face red with anger. Isabella, do you understand what you're doing to this company? Our stock dropped 15% this week because of this scandal. If you publicly admit you were wrong, it'll drop another 20% at minimum. We could lose major contracts. Investors will panic. And if I don't admit I was wrong, Isabella said with ice in her voice, an innocent man continues to suffer unjustly. His daughter watches her father be vilified for an act of kindness and heroism. That's completely unacceptable to me. This is business, not charity or social work, another board member snapped dismissively. This is justice, Isabella corrected firmly, something that absolutely should matter in business, even if it doesn't always. Another executive leaned forward. You're letting emotions cloud your judgment. One mechanic's reputation isn't worth millions in shareholder value. One man's life and reputation are worth everything, Isabella said quietly, because if we can't stand up for basic human decency, then we have no business calling ourselves leaders. The room fell silent at her words. Freeze moment number 1. She submitted her formal resignation letter, saying clearly for everyone to hear, if the truth causes people to lose faith in me as a leader, then that's the price worth paying to regain my conscience and integrity. The board erupted in angry protests and attempts to convince her to reconsider, but Isabella walked out without looking back, her decision final. Ethan learned the news through television that evening, stunned to see Isabella standing at a podium surrounded by cameras, holding up both the security footage and the detailed maintenance report side by side. I accused Ethan Miles of attempting to harm me, she said clearly, her voice steady and controlled. I was completely wrong. The truth is that Mr. Miles saved my life by repairing a dangerous oil leak in my brake system that would have caused catastrophic failure. He did this without any expectation of reward, without even knowing whose car it was, simply because he saw a problem and fixed it. And I repaid his extraordinary kindness by destroying his reputation and his business. She paused, her carefully maintained composure cracking slightly, showing real emotion. I allowed my personal trauma from my father's death in a car accident to completely cloud my judgment. When I saw someone under my car, I saw only danger and malice. I didn't see a good man doing a good deed. That failure of perception and judgment is entirely mine, not his. Reporters began shouting questions, but Isabella held up her hand. I've resigned from Gray Tech effective immediately. I'm using my personal resources to establish a fund to compensate Mr. Miles for lost business and to support vocational training in automotive repair. And I hope that my very public mistake can teach others about the dangers of judging without complete information. The next day, Ethan went to Isabella's penthouse to find her. But the apartment was completely empty. Only a handwritten note remained on the kitchen counter. I'm leaving Chicago because I can't face the daily reminder of the harm I caused. But thank you for not hating me. You're a better person than I deserve to know. IG. 3 months passed. Ethan slowly began to rebuild, though the garage remained quiet. Grace's condition remained stable, but the medications were expensive. Then one morning, Ethan received a letter from Children's Memorial Hospital. Grace had been hospitalized 2 weeks earlier with a severe asthma attack. The hospital bill was enormous, $20,000 for the emergency treatment and 3-day stay. But attached to the bill was a payment confirmation. Bill paid in full by anonymous donor, patient responsibility, rear-entered. At the bottom, in small print, donor initials, IG. Ethan sat down hard, the letter trembling in his hands. She'd paid from what must have been her last savings after resigning. Isabella had used nearly all her remaining personal funds to pay Grace's medical bills before leaving Chicago, ensuring the little girl would get the care she needed. 1 week later, Ethan received an unexpected invitation in the mail. Professionally printed on heavy cardstock, you are cordially invited to the grand opening of Hope Garage, a free vocational training center for underprivileged youth. Founder, Isabella Gray. Technical director position available for the right candidate. The address was an old warehouse in a struggling neighborhood on Chicago's west side. When Ethan arrived with Grace the following Saturday, he found dozens of young people from difficult backgrounds learning automotive repair, welding, electrical work, and other valuable trades. Modern equipment filled the space. Professional instructors worked with small groups. A sense of purpose and hope permeated everything. And Isabella, dressed in simple work clothes instead of her usual designer suits, was teaching a group of teenagers how to properly change a tire. She looked healthier somehow, more relaxed, more genuine than he'd ever seen her. When she saw Ethan and Grace enter, she walked over slowly, uncertainty and hope both visible on her face. You came. I wasn't sure you would after everything. I need someone who knows how to fix not just machines, but trust. Someone who understands that second chances matter. She formally offered him the position of technical director at the center, with a salary equal to what he'd made as an engineer, plus full benefits including health insurance for Grace. Ethan replied quietly, his voice thick with emotion. I thought you were the person who took everything from me. Now I know you're the person who helped me find what I'd forgotten. What did you forget? That mistakes don't define us. How we fix them does. That's what really matters in the end. Isabella looked around at the garage full of hopeful young faces, many from broken homes and difficult circumstances. After I left Gray Tech, I realized I'd been so focused on technology and profit margins that I'd completely forgotten why technology matters. To help people build better lives, to create opportunities. So you built this place. I built this because a man I wrongly accused taught me the most important lesson I've ever learned. That real strength isn't about never making mistakes. It's about having the courage to admit them publicly and make them right, regardless of the cost. Grace ran up, her eyes wide with excitement. Miss Isabella, this place is amazing. Can I learn to fix cars too when I'm older? Isabella knelt down to the girl's level. Absolutely. In fact, I was hoping you and your dad would both be here teaching alongside me. This center needs good teachers who understand kindness as much as they understand mechanics. But I'm not a teacher, Ethan protested. You taught me the most important lesson I've ever learned, Isabella said softly. You taught me that character is proven not when people believe in you, but when they don't. You never once became bitter or vengeful despite having every right to be. You just kept being who you are, honest, kind, skilled. That's exactly what these kids need to see. The two of them began working together at Hope Garage, creating a partnership that felt both natural and redemptive. She taught entrepreneurship, business skills, financial literacy, and professional development, while he taught automotive repair, problem solving, and hands-on technical skills. Grace played with the scholarship students between classes, her laughter echoing through the garage. One evening several months later, Isabella found Ethan replacing light bulbs in the workshop, the warm light reflecting on his focused face. Have you ever been truly angry at me? Do you ever hate me for what I did to you? I was angry at first, absolutely, he admitted honestly. But then I realized you were just someone learning how to trust again after trauma. Just like me after Sarah died. Symbol of rebirth. On the main wall hung the oil-stained metal clamp, now polished bright and mounted on a beautiful wooden plaque with a brass inscription, "Mistakes that saved a life." Students would often stop and ask about it, and Ethan would tell them the story, the whole story, including his wrongful accusation. "But why do you display it if it reminds you of being accused?" one student asked. "Because it also reminds us that truth always comes out eventually," Ethan explained, "and that people can change, grow, and build something beautiful out of something broken." She admitted one quiet afternoon, "I used to think I was strong because I didn't need anyone, because I stood alone and relied only on myself. But when you stayed silent and dignified during my accusations, I realized only truly strong people don't need to prove themselves or fight back with anger." He smiled. "Actually, I was just afraid Grace would see me lose my temper. I didn't want her to learn that anger is the right response to injustice. I wanted her to see that patience and truth are stronger." They both laughed, the sound genuine and healing. The months passed, and Hope Garage flourished beyond their initial dreams. Dozens of students graduated with valuable job skills and employment already lined up with local businesses. Local companies began specifically requesting Hope Garage graduates because they knew these young people had been taught not just technical skills, but ethics, integrity, and perseverance. Isabella and Ethan fell into an easy, comfortable partnership, their different strengths complementing each other perfectly. She handled the administrative side, the fundraising, the public relations, the grant applications, the strategic planning. He managed the technical training, the hands-on teaching, the practical problem solving, the mentorship relationships. And Grace became the unofficial mascot and heart of the place, bringing joy and innocence to an environment that dealt daily with second chances and redemption. One afternoon, a reporter from the Chicago Tribune came to do a feature story on the center and its unusual origin story. "How did you two end up working together as partners?" the journalist asked directly, "given your complicated and painful history?" Ethan and Isabella looked at each other and smiled, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. "We ended up working together," Isabella said thoughtfully, "because we both learned that mistakes are only failures if we refuse to learn from them and grow. If we use them to become better people, they become something else entirely." "And what's that?" "Opportunities," Ethan finished her thought. "Opportunities to prove that people can change fundamentally, grow beyond their worst moments, and build something truly beautiful out of something that was broken and painful." The reporter scribbled notes. "And the students? What do you tell them about your story?" "We tell them the truth," Isabella said. "That I wrongly accused Ethan, destroyed his business, and hurt him and his daughter. That I let fear and trauma make me cruel, and that he chose forgiveness over bitterness. We tell them," Ethan added, "that everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you do next. Do you hide from them, or do you fix them?" Real witness detail at end of act. Isabella knelt beside Grace, who was working on a small engine repair project, wiping grease from the little girl's hands with a rag. and said softly with genuine emotion, "Sweetie, if anyone ever misunderstands you or accuses you wrongly, don't be afraid. The truth always finds its way home eventually." Grace looked up at her with complete trust and love. "Like how you found your way home to us?" Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, sweetheart, exactly like that." 1 year later, Hope Garage had expanded to serve over 200 students annually with a 95% job placement rate. The press wrote articles. Former CEO and mechanic turned mistakes into second chances. At the first anniversary celebration, Grace presented a gift, a painting of three people standing under a blue sky with words scrawled in a child's handwriting, "For people who fix what others break." Isabella laughed through tears. Ethan said quietly, "You once asked why I wasn't afraid of losing my reputation. Because I believed if I did the right thing, everything would fix itself." She replied, "And I used to think strength came from power. But now I know that it comes from trust." Final scene. The three of them stood together in front of the garage, the sunset painting everything orange and gold. The polished metal clamp caught the light, gleaming like a small piece of a miracle. On the wall beside it, a new inscription had been added. "Sometimes what we think is a mistake is actually the beginning of trust being repaired." Below that, a photograph. Ethan kneeling under a car, rescuing a kitten, captured on the same security camera that had once accused him. But this time, the full context was visible. The whole truth. A student asked Isabella, "What's the most important thing you've learned?" She looked at Ethan and Grace. That judgment without understanding is cruelty. That fear makes us see enemies where there are only neighbors. And that the strongest thing you can ever say is, "I was wrong." Grace tugged on her sleeve. "And we can always fix things, right?" Isabella smiled and pulled them both close. "Yes, sweetheart, we can always fix things. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes courage. But if we're willing to try, we can fix almost anything." The kitten, Hope, now fully grown, wandered out and sat at Ethan's feet, purring contentedly. Everything broken had been repaired. Everything lost had been found. Everything misunderstood had been made clear. And in that clarity, three people had found home. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe to Strong Dad Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.